Mswatu ingosi thula akayithathe akahambe nayo akayithathe yotenza bakewone akayithathe
Make better money choices. Choose a bank that takes your money seriously. Business Watch is brought to you by Nedbank.
You're watching Nedbank Business Watch on Eswatini TV. The time now is 2 p.m. Central African Time. We thank you for making time for watching us this afternoon. Certainly, you've made a good decision. You'll enjoy the show. My name is Sifiso Ngumalo and I'm with Notsile Sitole.
Very good afternoon to you and glad to have you on the program. Celebrated annually, Global Money Week is dedicated to equipping children and the youth with essential financial knowledge and skills, from saving and budgeting to making informed decisions that secure their future. In a world where financial choices are becoming more complex, the need for early financial education has never been more critical. This year's theme, Smart Money Talks, encourages honest conversations about money. Why should banks and financial institutions take the lead in driving these conversations today? We explore how Nedbank is playing a pivotal role in promoting financial literacy, empowering young people, and creating inclusive opportunities for all.
And also the program, we do want to take you to this very important development around Eswatini's inflation rate, which continues to ease, with the latest figures now showing a drop to 1.9% in February, down from 2.1% in January, and significantly lower than this time last year. While this may come as welcome relief for consumers, bringing more stable prices and improved purchasing power, it also raises deeper questions about what this means for businesses as well as the broader economy. Is this a sign of stability or a signal of slowing demand? We will unpack the impact of falling inflation with our economist, Sanelis Bia. We also do have another conversation with the focus on the 9 local artisans that are back home after representing the Kingdom of Eswatini at the Suraj Kund International Mela Crafts Fair in India. It is a globally recognized platform that celebrates culture, craftsmanship, and heritage. What opportunities did the exposure unlock, and why does participation in international fairs matter for the growth of local creative industries? We speak to Zodwa Vilagati, the Principal Handicraft Officer, to reflect on their experience as well as what it means for the future of our artisans here at home. So stay with us for all those conversations.
Business stories coming up after this.
Digital helps you make cross-border payments. Human gives you global specialists. Digital allows you to apply for a loan anytime, anywhere. Human connects you to credit experts. Digital puts you in control of your money, while Human connects you to wealth advisors. Digital allows you to freeze, unfreeze, cancel, and reorder your card. Human gives you that personal touch. Digital when you want it. Human when you need it. Get the complete private banking experience with Nedbank Private Clients.
Welcome back. This is Nedbank Business Watch. Let's have a look at our business stories.
Made in Eswatini, the very Made in Eswatini Consumer Fair launch has been launched again in a remarkable show of commitment to empowering local businesses. Her Royal Highness Princess Sakizo has pledged to cover entrance fees for selected Eswatini companies, opening doors for broader participation and inclusion. Adding to this momentum, MTN Momo has come on board with a significant sponsorship of 100,000 emalangeni per year over the next 3 years. The fair, which will be held at Dr. Sishai Road in Mbabane on the 1st of May this year, was launched at the Mbabane Municipal Council.
What you have launched here today is actually a must-attend shopping experience. I wasn't part of the first edition last year, but I was following very closely on social media. The atmosphere was electrifying, and it was so inspiring to see the actual idea come to life. This year, I am definitely attending. Please allow me to also convey my gratitude to the sponsors and partners who have chosen to stand behind this initiative. The sustainability and success of this initiative depends greatly on the support from the private sector. MTN Momo, your generous support demonstrates that true leadership in business is not only measured by profit, but by courage to invest in the growth of local enterprise and the prosperity of our nation. Your support is an investment in the dreams of entrepreneurs, in the growth of local industries, and in the dignity of those who work tirelessly to innovate, create, and produce. Honourable Minister, this is not the first time MTN Momo has partnered with a peculiar people. They supported the inaugural Made in Eswatini Consumer Fair and the Eswatini Consumer Choice Awards.
The Manzini Arch Development Project construction site at Manzini Golf Course has been handed over to the construction company J&E Construction by the Minister for Commerce, Industry and Trade. The project by the African Alliance will cost over 4 billion emalangeni.
Our role as government is to find companies that will turn over 10 billion emalangeni a year, and to find 10 of those companies. Inkosi yasithuma sithole inkampani leti 10 over 10 billion ngemnyaka sithole tize tibe lishumi. Lokho ke kusinika insaya lelikhuni mawucabanga, but uma ubona bo African Alliance tinkampani letemaswati nemsebenzi lomkhulu letwendako nekuchubeka kutimisela ukuthi ema profits laba wendako ba reinvest even kusitshela ukuthi we have no reason to fail, because this company African Alliance has demonstrated unequivocally the fact that it can be done. And I'm very excited to be here today. I had a very, very busy schedule, a very, very busy morning, but I'd rather not be anywhere else today but here. Sitawukhumbula ke bekunene ukuthi inkosi ihlabe isoila kule minyaka lembalwa lephelile ukuthi lo msebenzi usukume sajabula besikhona la Ngwenyama himself yakhonjiswa bumengemenge netithombe ukuthi sekutawuba njani lapha kaManzini. Kunengelo kwendekile since, but lamuhla sesitawunika contractor ukuthi saluqala usebenta, and lokho siyakubonga kakhulu kuba African Alliance because it really speaks to the values that the company subscribes to. They fulfill their promises. And I know, Honorable Ngumalo, that there are many other projects in the pipeline that African Alliance has committed to in the nation. Babek Gininza spoke to some of them, and I have zero doubt in my head that all of these projects will be executed over the passage of time. We are truly excited as well that this project will be done in many phases. The first project that you will see immediately is a drive-through KFC, but there will be other commercial properties that will be developed here, as well as a service center for government that will be called the Jewel, which will be a one-stop shop service center where all the services that government offers will be centralized in Manzini. And we have actually started working on the modalities of that with African Alliance. But the jewel building will actually be here, and it will allow all people in the country that come to Manzini to get all their services here at the Manzini Art Development, whether it is passports, whether it is birth certificates, whether it is marriage certificates, whether it's death certificates, trading licenses, registering your business, car registry, you name it. It will all be found at the jewel, and we are trying to move very quickly towards First World, and this will be one of the subsequent projects that will happen here at Manzini Arch. There will be a huge hotel here as well that has been fully designed and will soon be erected as soon as the first phase of this development happens. So all of this is telling us here, that this is indeed a very big project. When all the projects are combined, it's somewhere in the region of 3 and 4 billion in Malangeni, actually.
We're looking at least 800 people to be employed on this project. Just bear in mind also this project comes in phases. Ultimately, it should be a 6 billion project, a 46 billion project. Sikala KFC, obviously the jewel, which I think the minister has explained. I'm not going to explain again. And then the hotel. Good, one of the key drivers of the economy is agriculture and tourism for me. And now to drive those sectors, there are factors of production that you need to happen. One of them, so the biggest need, Eswatini, is accommodation.
And that is your business brief this afternoon.
We talked to Zodwa Vilagati after the break, and we talk all things the Suraj Khan Mela Handicrafts Fair that was in India on the 31st of January. After the break, stay with us. You're watching Nedbank Business Watch. Lesikhathi sitawubuka indzaba lakhona ma-artisans la imfica labuye ekhaya-ke Eswatini ngemuva kwekuthi aparticipate ku-Suraj Kund International Mela Crafts Fair eveni laseNdiya lebeyibanjwe mhla tingamashumi enyangweni yaBhimbidvwane kuya kumhla tilishumi-nesihlanu kule nyanga lephelile inyanga yeNdlovana. Katiwa-ke i-Suraj Kund International Mela yatiwa kakhulu ngokuthi ikhona ukuthi ithuthukise iphindze ikhone ukupreserve nokuthi-ke i-celebrate ema-handicrafts lakhona ikakhulu etindzabeni temasiko i-cultural heritage. Iphindze-ke ikwente lokhu ngokuthi ikhone kubeka abantu esithombeni lakhona bangabona ngumhlaba wonke imisebenti yabo nokuthi-ke bakhone kuthengisa kulolo hlangothi lolo directly kulawo ma-consumers lawo. Sitawuxoxisana-ke na Zodwa Vilagati, long principal handicraft officer nyalo. Kuva nje ukuthi engabe vele ngimaphi ama-benefits nawe matfuba labawatfolile bangema-local artisans from the international event lena nokuthi kumcoka leni ekuthenini nanabo babe part of i-craft fair lefana nalena. Sikuvusele mphephethe sikwamukele ehlelweni Nedbank Business Watch. Maybe nje ungacala usifake khona le Suraj Kund Handicraft Mela Fair ekuthenini i-platform le kanjani nokuthi-ke imcoka kangakanani kini ningama-artisans.
Ngiyabonga kakhulu umsakati. I-Suraj Kund International Mela Crafts Fair lebanjwa njalo even laseNdiya ife noma-ke ingumbukiso lomkhulu kakhulu lokhangisa yona phela imisebenzi yetandla kufaka ekhathi nadoda emasiko. Ifeke lenhle kakhulu ikakhulu kibo bakhicithi bemisebenzi wetandla ngoba bayakhona ukuthi babone imisebenzi leyenziwa bozakwabo labasuka emaveni lehlukehlukene emhlabeni wonke. Kuyabasita-ke ngoba bayakhona kubona lokuthi leti makethe letinkulu temhlaba tifuna lihlobo luni lwemisebenzi yetandla kuloku labakwendako bona bangemaswati. Lokusho ukuthi bayakhona ukuthi bathi nasebafikile bahlangane nabo labakhicitako labasuka emhlabeni wonke babone ama-designs lamasha nabo labafike bese sebayawenda nabafika ekhaya baphinde futhi bakhone ukuthi bashiyelane eligwayi basandawona kuchuba libhizinisi labo lemisebenzi wetandla khona kulona mbukiso.
Yeah, siyathola ukuthi bayimfica laba bebahambile lasebabuyile ekhaya. Ngabe ngimiphi nje imikhangiso yabo lebe bakhangisa ngayo le?
Ngiyabonga kakhulu Msakati. Lokusho ukuthi imikhangiso le beyiseveni laseNdiya yemaswati yokhangiswa bekungiwo phela umsebenzi wesikhumba lo wenziwa ngiyo i-Leather Association lelive ekufaka khona emabhande, tipatshi, tikhwama nato ticathulo. Kubuye-ke kube nato-ke tinto letibunjiwe ma-ceramics phela lokufaka ekhathi tingilazi, emaplata nako konke longakucabanga lokubunjiwe kenjalo sokungiloku lokucwepheshile lokungasiloku kwelibumba lwalakhaya lwetinziwo. Kuphinde kube-ke nemkhicito-ke welitshe Msakade lebe kungumkhicito lebe sicala kuhamba nawo. Siyajabula kubika emaswatini ukuthi imkhicito yethu yelitshe ifike yadlala ibhefu kakhulu ngoba lo mkhicito bekahambise imkhicito lefana nayo i-Big 5 lokusho ukuthi bekuthi ilwane letibaliwe kenja le Big 5 beyikhona naleminye imikhicito lethi ingakhiwa ngalo litshe. Bese-ke kuba ngilo-ke buhlalu balo live amaswati akithi ayaphothela Ngoza angifuni ukukuyenga mihle imkhicito yethu vele ithi ingafika lena bese ibamba lelizinga ngoba siyayibese sesakha imikhicito leyo lefanele le makethe lokusho ukuthi i-beadwork yethu eyayibese seyithatha loluhlobo lokuba i-jewelry ithi nayifika lena bese-ke seyiyahlabana-ke kulele eminye imisebenzi lephothiwe noma-ke leyikhiwe ngabo ubuhlalu. Bese-ke sekuba-ke nanabo-ke ubuhlalu bethu-ke lobakhiwa ngetindumbu noma ngema-seeds leti ngema-natural beads. Tingileto-ke letidlala ibhethu natona tifikile bayatithanda kakhulu lokhu kwethu kwekugaba esandleni nasensanyeni lokwakhiwe ngawo ama-natural beads. Bese sesiba nasi-ke sikhwama sethu lesithengiswa kamanzini emakhethi nasi lesiyi-shopper bag leyakhiwe ngeliplastiki bayasithanda kakhulu naso Msakati bayasijabulela. Lokusho ukuthi nje ngalamafisha ngingaveda ukuthi imisebenzi yelive seyingileyo leseyikhonile ukuthi itfolela imakethe kule trade fair lenkulu kangaka emhlabeni wonke ngoba le ngitakuvetela kona Msakati ukuthi bayaye bathina bafika la stolini ema-visitors abe nokusitshela lokuthi sekuphele emalanga solo bafuna live la kaNgwane ukuthi likuphi bafuna imkhicito yalo ngoba bayayibona ukuthi ingileyo lesezingeni kubamba dona emazinga futhi ingileyo leyakheke kahle lokusho ukuthi iku-high quality.
Phephethe sibonga kakhulu isikhathi sakho siphinze-ke siyanihalisela ngemisebenzi lemihle lenyendako kukhangisa live nekubhebhetelisa umjeka welive nisahamba emavela afana nemave aseNdiya sibahloleni emakethe masibuya sicocisana nasomnotho sanele sibiya. Welcome back to the program. We talk now to our economist, Sanelus Bia, regarding the inflation rate, which is continuing to ease. You will remember that on Tuesday, the Central Statistics Office released the latest consumer price index, which is showing that the headline inflation rate last month stood at 1.9%, which is down from 2.1% in January. Figures also indicate a significant drop compared to the 4% that was recorded in February last year. While this lower inflation rate is welcome news for consumers, as it means more stable prices and, of course, greater purchasing power, it also raises important questions about the impact on businesses. What does this trend mean for profitability? Sanelus Bia, our economist, chimes in on that very, very point. Mrs. Bia, good afternoon. Welcome to the program. Maybe the big picture here is that the inflation has dropped to 1.9%. What are the key drivers behind this continued decline?
Right. Thank you, Mr. Nxumalo, and good afternoon to those, good afternoon to the viewers. So when we looked at the numbers, we saw that we've seen, certain sectors posting negative inflation, and we've also seen certain sectors really just posting zero growth, and we have the likes of food and, food and alcoholic beverages. Those are the ones that posted positive figures, 0.8 and 0.2. respectively percentage points in terms of increases, and then the likes of education came down to 0%, and same thing with health, while we also saw some negative growth in transport, and also saw negative growth in the hotels industry. So when we look at those numbers, Nxumalo, we are seeing some signs of deflation in certain sectors and certain areas, while we are still seeing inflation in other areas. Therefore, we are seeing the number operating to bring it down to 1.9%.
Well, when we look at some of the categories, and as you mentioned yourself, you look at health and as well as transport, they have seen very low or even yet negative monthly changes. Yeah. What does this tell us about the demand in that particular economy?
So that was a bit of a worrying number, more especially the transport number, that negative growth in transportation. So we do know that we saw the price of fuel, the pump price coming down, but that was towards the later part of the month. So we didn't expect it to then contribute that much negatively. So what that signals, Nxumalo, is the fact that there might be a bit of a demand problem in the economy, because, when you look at the transportation figure, it is usually what goes into the headline number there, because it is very volatile and it moves quite a lot. So it's one of the key variables that we look into in terms of overall health of the economy and overall demand in the economy. Same thing with the recreation space there. When we look at it, we are seeing that negative growth. And again, what it means there is the prices are starting to come down, more especially in the retail, in the hotel sector. So what that signals is it's an issue of demand. We are not getting the demand that that industry is looking for. So it could be an issue to do with our international tourism, because domestic tourists don't tend to use hotels that much.
Yeah, I mean, for the ordinary Eswatini, this sounds like relief, particularly this low inflation. But is it something that is evenly felt across income groups? And better yet, especially considering food inflation as well as, it's something that remains present, even though low.
So when you look at the numbers, Nxumalo, you look at food inflation and then you look at the utilities, that's where we are seeing most of the growth. So what it means is we have a consumer who is still battling with high cost of living pressures.
Yes.
Remember, when we are talking inflation, as long as the number still increases, even though right now we are at what we are calling a disinflation spiral, the number keeps going down, but it means prices are still increasing, but not at a faster rate. They're increasing at a slower rate. So what that means is, in terms of demand, we have a consumer that is still battling with their rentals and household utilities, and we have a consumer that still battles with their food. So that is a component of what we call a basic needs for the consumers. And what it then means is the consumer is still on those basic needs. They're not yet moving towards, those sectors that really show when demand is healthy in the economy, like your retail sector, like your tourism sector, and, the transport. We expected it to also increase that much. So there is that uneven split in how people feel it. So the wealthier tend not to feel it that much, more especially when the numbers are going down this way. But the middle class still has to deal with the high cost of living, and the lower classes, the poorest of the poor, again, this still takes up a lot of their money. So it does show to issues of a, somewhat of a subdued demand in the economy.
So it isn't felt evenly in between income groups.
Yeah.
The premise in question when I introduced this segment was what this means for business profitability, especially for sectors that rely on price increases to sustain margins.
So when we look at that, it's twofold, Mr. Nxumalo. Number one, inflation, we call it a necessary evil in economics, in that businesses need that for their margins, right? And then secondly, it also talks to demand. You could have the margins, but if you are not having the demand, again, that's a zero-sum game. You are not going to move forward much being profitable. But then there's also volumes. So in terms of profitability, as businesses remain profitable, Nxumalo, because if you remember, from 2020 to 2023, after COVID, we saw very huge spikes in prices, and that's where the cost of living pressures that we are still dealing with today came from. So businesses do remain profitable even when we are seeing this low inflation and this disinflation spiral. Where would get more worried, Mr. Nxumalo, is those sectors that are positing negative growth, because now what it means is those sectors are deflating. So that is a situation where it now eats into the profits of the producer, in that they have to now, charge a lower price across their products. And when you do that, it does eat into your margins, and there is that issue of profitability. But again, it's a mixed picture when you look at those that are still posting positive growth and a zero growth rate, because they are still at the same level that they were the previous month. So it's not affecting their profitability, but it is those sectors that are experiencing negative growth that are somehow finding it difficult and eating into margins. But with the transport sector, when you look at the major driver of that negative number, it is the fact that we saw fewer coming down the previous month, and then also the fact that we're coming through from expenditures in schools and whatnot. And if you look at the clothing space, we saw that in January we've experienced that subdued, that negative growth in that space, because consumers were still focused on schools and whatnot, only to rebound in this month. So with the transport sector, again, we are seeing that negative growth owing to that price decrease on the pumps. But what it also means, Mr. Nxumalo, when you see adjustments in terms of those fuel costs, it's also just a correction of higher margins in the previous months, and then the government, through the regulatory framework, somehow corrects for that. So it's a balancing act. So they still do remain profitable, but it does eat into the margins.
So, Sbia, thank you for your time. A necessary evil indeed, with everything that is deciphered for us here as we look at the easing of this inflation rate. So let's be our economist. We go for a break now. We'll be back with Zamangwane from Nedbank. Stay with us.
Welcome back. You are still watching Nedbank Business Watch, and this week, Eswatini joins the global community in observing the Global Money Week. And today, Nedbank Eswatini is bringing you that conversation on Smart Money Talks Financial Literacy. And I'm joined by Zamangwane Dlamini, who is the head of branch networks and personal banking at Nedbank Eswatini, just to talk more about Global Money Week and why smart money decisions actually matter. Zamangwane, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Good, good. Great to have you in studio. What is Global Money Week?
Okay, so Global Money Week is an international initiative which is primarily focused on helping young people to understand and develop smart money decisions or financial knowledge from a very early age. The intention of this initiative, as you've mentioned, is global, is to ensure that we encourage the young people and the youth to have confidence to handle their finances in the future. Yeah.
Why is it important for the banking sector to rally behind Global Money Week? Parents can talk to their children about why money decisions matter. Financial institutions, financial regulators can say it's very important that you're aware of the financial contracts that you get into with different banks. But why is it important that banking, or Nedbank specifically, rallies behind the movement?
So as banks, our primary role is to ensure that we provide clients or consumers with knowledge that is accessible and practical to the client's needs. So that's the primary role that banks would play. And then in terms of the Nedbank aspect of it, from a Nedbank perspective, it is our financial responsibility, if I may say so, to actually ensure that we are part of this movement, to make sure that we are actually educating and empowering the youth so that they grow up to be the adults who will contribute positively into the economy, who contribute positively into their communities as well. They learn from an early age to save, principles and concepts such as budgeting as well, so that we start to demystify the money talks, if I may say so. Yeah.
Discussing money with family can be rather a taboo element. And I don't think the conversation about financial literacy should end only in this week. The theme is Smart Money Talks. What does it mean to you as Zamangwane, and how we can help Eswatini, whether it's at community level, whether it's at family level, to have openly these conversations about money?
Yeah, so you've just said it, you've used the word taboo, but I think Eswatini, generally, we've always shied away from having conversations, frank conversations about money. And to your point, it does start in the family unit. It's important that families sit down and have open and transparent conversations with their children. Give them information that they will be able to accept, that may be palatable according to their age group. In terms of young children, as an example, teach them the value of money, the value of saving, the value of reaping a benefit after putting away some money. And also in relationships, speak about the finances in your relationships. Finances are foundational to having this, but to your point, money is tight, and as a result, the conversation becomes taboo. But if we have a frank conversation, then we are actually able to build ourselves, the family, our communities, by having the open conversations to say, okay, this is how my finances look like as a family. And so how can we build our family or strengthen our family with the finances that we have? Because you are then capacitated with the correct information that ensures that there is long-term sustainability in your family. But in terms of community engagements as well, as Nedbank, we strive to have community empowerment conversations and financial literacy programs that actually where we actually sit down with the community to help them in terms of their financial aspirations, to demystify some of the items and product offerings that banks may offer, because to your point, sometimes the consumer may not really understand the financial and technical jargon per se, but they want to understand, what does it mean for me? Global Money Week is coming at an apt time. 2 weeks or so ago, the Finance Minister delivered the budget speech. And when we look at the budget speech, we may think it's at a macro scale. He's talking about the country, the economy, but you have to take it down a level to understand what does it mean. When they are speaking about the budget of Eswatini, what does it mean for me in my individual capacity? What does it mean for me in the home that I'm staying in what I travel to work or to school with? What does it mean for me to purchase? How do I save? How do I build wealth? So that's the key component of what it means to me personally to say that we should be actively having these frank conversations, challenging some of the theories and thoughts around money and money management. Yeah.
Global Money Week often speaks to the young people, and the common narrative around money is a resource, or use money as a resource. I'd like for you to just highlight the kind of superpower that one gains, not only a young person, but an individual gains when they become financially literate, when they become aware of their income and how they probably need to be prioritizing the budget.
I would say the superpower that financial literacy and this Global Money Week is actually providing in terms of the literacy would be choice and control. You've got the choice, you've got the choices, or you are capacitated to make the right choices because you understand your money, you understand your finances. And then you've got control because then you can exercise that control based on these decisions that you've made or these choices that you've made. So it builds your confidence, your financial muscle confidence, if I may call it that. It assists you to avoid unnecessary debt or debt that may not make financial sense at certain points in time, because there is good debt over time, and that is part of a financial literacy conversation as well. So it also assists you to, like I've said, in terms of the control, you're confident enough that you're making the correct choices for your future to reach your goals or aspirations. Yeah.
We are 3 months into the year 2026. It's the first quarter, actually. And, you know, every year people make different resolutions.
Yeah.
One of those resolutions probably saving money or investing.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the lines, you know, things just go south. So perhaps you could just talk to us a bit more about the habits the smart money habits that people need to adopt. It's not too late. You probably haven't saved as much as you wanted from January, but it's not too late to start now.
Yeah.
What are some smart money habits that people need to get into?
So for different phases of life, you may have different goals. And to your point, I believe it's never too late to reassess your finances. It's never too late to reassess your goals, your saving goals. Emaswati ayathi kuqalwa kancane. In every aspect, in terms of whatever you may want to achieve from a financial aspect, I would always say start small. Start with what you can. And starting small means just start small but be consistent. If you are able to save 50 emalangeni consistently, it builds your wealth portfolio that is applicable to your situation. And similarly, you need to stay consistent. I think the consistency is the key element of it. We are sitting here, we are privileged, we are employed, we are working. And I always say, if possible, pay yourself first, as far as you can. If you are able to celebrate a paycheck, then you are also just as well able to celebrate a saving goal. Save towards a goal.
No matter how little.
No matter how little. So if you want to maybe go on a vacation or trip, you need to make sure that you've outlined that goal and you're saving consistently towards it. And I always say, if you're able to reward yourself, like I was just mentioning, if you're able to reward yourself with a KFC at the end of the month or when you are paid, then I believe that you can save that 100 emalangeni for that KFC if you are diligent enough. And if you have got the financial muscle, again, from a literacy perspective, understanding what the value of your savings will give you, then certainly those would be the two things that I would say are quite key. Start small, be consistent and diligent, have an end goal in mind, and as far as possible, pay yourself first or reward yourself first. Some people are in businesses, and if you're self-employed, sometimes others may argue to say that the business needs to stay afloat. But I also say you also need to reap a benefit of being in the business. Reward yourself in the business. If you're a sole trader, as an example, you have a small business, reward yourself. Give yourself a salary, but make sure that that salary, you're also placing something aside for any eventuality. Which could also be part of a savings goal, which could be part of one of this year's goals, to say we are at the tail end of the first quarter. So let's all just take a step back and reflect and say, okay, is this the position that I want my finances to look like? What are my goals for the future? And exactly what can I change in this discipline to become financially healthier?
Saving and being consistent while at it. I think you just spoke mostly to the grown-ups. Let's talk to Bobandle that very much have no or almost very little understanding of what 2 Emalangeni can do. What are some of these habits that they need to take into account? Because it's very hard to convince a 6-year-old that I'm giving you 5 Emalangeni, but I'm asking you to save at least 250. They will say no. But what is it that we can do as the adults to help them understand that 2 Emalangeni can make greater progress in terms of your investment journey?
I think you take the bundle's intelligence for granted. To be honest, I think the bundles are really quite versed with finances, and we are thankful that some of the educational programs are actually coming up with these principles from an early age. And I think from time immemorial, akona ema piggy banks where children save. But to your point, children usually, in the absence of responsibilities and knowing the value of money, children will usually save towards a goal, which is why it's important, like I mentioned earlier, to outline the goals. Why are we saving? Because you go out with Bundle and Bundle sees something nice, and Bundle can see that this something nice is 20 Emalangeni. And he or she wants something nice, but if you want to build discipline under that principle of saving, you assist Bundle to know that, okay, I'm going to give you 2 Emalangeni every day when you go to school. But don't spend all of it. If you come back with change, we'll put it in the piggy bank, and at the end of the week, we will count how much we have, because we want to buy that particular item that you said you wanted. And if we are going to buy this particular item, you need to save 10 of these 2 Emalangenis. For us to buy this. So that means you can save in 6 days. Break it down to the level in which Bundle will understand, to say, okay, even when they're at school and they say, okay, asambe sitting my chips, and Bundle will say, oh, I can only buy my chips R1 because I have to take back change. Mommy said that if I put away my R1 for the next 10 days, that particular doll that I want, or that particular racing car that we saw.
It goes back to how we said we need to have this conversation openly at family level even.
Yes.
How is Nedbank ensuring financial tools are inclusive even for people with disabilities?
Yeah, so like I've mentioned, we have a duty as banks to make sure that we provide accessible information that is practical. And accessibility in terms of financial inclusion, or people who've got disabilities, is the complete spectrum. We, as banks or as Nedbank, and also under the supervision of our regulators, need to ensure that we are having conversations where we have included those who may be disabled. So this is talking about access as examples. Accesses to our premises, to people who may be disadvantaged or who have disabilities, have access into the financial premises and things like that. You will note the notes in terms of our currency and the coins themselves to someone who may be able-bodied, as we call them, they may not recognize some of the great features of our currency, but the currency has also made provisions for those that may be visually impaired, as an example, because of the textures. There are various indicators of those notes, and also within the banks themselves. If you get to an ATM, someone might say, oh wow, the keyboard is relatively loud as I'm punching in my code, but those keyboard sounds are designed specifically to be inclusive for other people who may be visually impaired, but they need the sound, and others who may be visually impaired as well, the texture of the keyboards and the like. But I think, to be honest, as an industry, we still have quite a long way to go in terms of accommodating. But the opportunities are there because everyone in this journey is actually willing to learn. And we want to take those who are also living with disabilities along with us. We pride ourselves as Nedbank, and we always say this at any given opportunity that we have. We actually have employees that are within the scope of Nedbank that are working for the bank who are disabled or visually impaired. And they execute their functions fully. And that's an indication that the inclusivity is remains a key and paramount conversation to be held. However, I do think that the continuous engagements with communities, for them to appreciate that this is not an exclusionary conversation, if I may say. Yeah.
Speaking of opportunities and inclusivity, what smart money products does Nedbank Eswatini have for especially young people?
Okay, so especially for the youth, we have got banking solutions designed for them. And we were talking about this earlier to say these products are meant or designed for them to start and implement the principle and discipline of saving from a very young age. So parents can open these types of savings accounts for their children. And these accounts, like I've mentioned, they are built to encourage the savings. So they have some attractive interest if you keep your funds in the savings account. They also have very nominal fees, meaning that the charges are not accrued in that aspect, because we are building discipline, and we understand that children will not necessarily be withdrawing every other day, but they do have access to a card, so that again there is a reward for the behavior that we are trying to build or inculcate. So we do have those kinds of products that are designed for young people to help them manage their money in a practical way. But of course, as you grow up, you move into a student. So we have specific student accounts as well that help the journey of a student moving from primary, high school, into tertiary, and well into their working environment as well. Still going along with that same account.
Very well. Thank you very much, Zamangwana Olivia. It's been a pleasure. That was Zamangwana Dlamini, Head of Branch Networks and Personal Banking for Nedbank Eswatini. We were discussing smart money talks, especially this Global Money Week. Nedbank Business Watch continues after this. Welcome back. We've come now to the final segment of the show, which is the market analysis, and I am joined by Bongani Mabuza, who is the Head of Treasury at Nedbank Eswatini, for some of the latest in markets. Mabuza, good to have you with us. So I'll start off in the US, where we are expecting a Fed meeting later today. Is there some sort of anticipation for or expectation in terms of rates?
Good afternoon to you, Notsile, and to your viewers. It's a real pleasure to be back here. I think that's a good place to start. Markets remain, they continue to trade with hesitation, right? Because of what's happening in Iran and the Federal Reserve meeting that we're expecting this afternoon. So with the Fed meeting, the expectation largely is that interest rates will remain unchanged. So that is pretty baked into expectations. But what markets are really watching out for is the language that the Federal Reserve uses in terms of future expectations for rates in the U.S. In terms of inflation expectations, in terms of impacts from an employment perspective in the U.S. Because that is the future expectations are likely to drive markets as they price in what the impacts of recent events are going to be going forward.
Given the conflict in the Middle East, oil prices have remained quite high, especially because of the closure of the main choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. Would you say, given how the events have turned out, markets are now kind of pricing in, let's say, a prolonged global energy shock? How's that looking?
Yeah, that's 100%. So markets are really assessing. There is still so much that is unknown in terms of the conflict in the Middle East. What the big unknown is really how long it's going to last, and that is consequential to global supply chains. The most obvious being oil, but there's other implications. So, for instance, about 20% of the world's urea comes from the Gulf region, which is a key ingredient in fertilizer and a lot of agricultural production. There is a lot of the inputs that go into the textile manufacturing industry, which Eswatini has which is large in Eswatini. That comes out, that is a byproduct of oil. So there are ramifications, second and third order ramifications of the conflict that are yet to be seen and felt should the conflict go on for longer than what was initially expected.
We're almost 3 weeks into the conflict. What's your observation in terms of the numbers? What story do they have to tell?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, Notsile. So, we'll look at the numbers a bit later, but we have oil hovering around $109 a barrel, and that just means that should oil continue to be at these elevated levels, what you're expecting is that the picture in terms of inflation globally, regionally, and more importantly in Eswatini is going to change. We had some inflation numbers come out today. In South Africa, you saw inflation eased to 3% from 3.5% back in January. In Eswatini, we saw inflation drop to 1.9%, which is a very good reading, down from 2.1% in January. So the story in terms of inflation has been good, but the risk is that you will see that number increase as the reality of the Middle East conflict settles in and consumers start to feel it.
Speaking of South Africa, you did say inflation cooled to 3.0% from 3.5%.
Yes.
How does this slowdown in inflation change the outlook for interest rates? Does it in any way pressure the maybe South African Reserve Bank to kind of reprice differently?
Yeah, 100%. And so all else equal, we expect that the lower the inflation, the lower interest rates will be. So the South African Reserve Bank was on a path to reduce interest rates, which is now made uncertain by the conflict in the Middle East. So what we expect now, for instance, is that in the South African Reserve Bank sitting, in the sitting of the Monetary Policy Committee this month, we expect the Reserve Bank to not make any changes, but rather to assess the situation, which is probably prudent. What might happen is that there might be a delay in the cuts that were expected if the conflict goes on longer than was initially expected.
All right. Yeah. Back to the numbers. Let's start off with equities. How are things looking?
Yeah, no, thanks. From an equities perspective, we saw relatively good performance from with indices all up. The S&P 500 was up by about 0.25%. The FTSE was up by close to a full percentage point. And closer to home, the JSE All Share Index was up by about 0.2%. And I think that this is reflective of good news. Markets are really waiting for any piece of good news. So what the good news that we got yesterday was that there was a deal reached between Iraq and Turkey to supply oil bypassing the Strait of Hormuz. So that was well received by markets, which is good from a South African perspective. I think the biggest news that came out of there was the deal between by Woolworths, the popular food and clothes retailer, to buy into food, which is a supplier of Woolworths. It supplies about 20% of about 20% of the products that Into Food produce is supplied into Woolworths. So it's just a vertical integration if you look at it that way. The purchase amount wasn't disclosed, but it is at a price earnings ratio that is below Woolworths' price, so it's expected to be earnings accretive. So that is some good news. And RFG, which has operations in Eswatini, has their annual general meeting today.
Yeah.
But really, what's been driving markets is news that's coming out from the Gulf region.
Moving on to commodities, we saw recently, specifically gold, trading at least above $5,000 per ounce. Does that positive movement impose or pose rather any risk in the near term?
No, thanks. From a gold perspective, I think you're right. We are now sitting at just under $5,000 per ounce. Down slightly, but we've been hovering above 5,000.
Yeah.
And what really there's a few ways to look at that. From an Eswatini perspective, the appreciation in the gold price has been positive for the country, because it has resulted in demand for the South African rand because of the large mineral deposits that sit in that country, and therefore an appreciation of our currency. I think we saw at the end of last year and going into the start of this year, the currency appreciate from over 17 emalangeni per dollar to around 15 emalangeni 60 cents, and just settled around 16 emalangeni just before the conflict started. So it's generally a positive from an inflation perspective because it creates demand for the South African rand, to which the langeni is pegged. And therefore it reduces the price of goods and services in Eswatini.
Right. And while we speak on currencies, all important countries, they usually see some form of currency weakness when energy prices rise.
Yeah.
Which countries or currencies are currently benefiting from higher energy prices?
Yeah, no, thanks. I think the short answer to that is that it's generally Gulf. It's generally oil-producing countries that are outside of the Gulf. So if you think of other OPEC member countries, or if you think of even within the African continent, countries that are producing oil that are not affected by the conflict would generally be beneficiaries of this movement, because there is more demand for the product, which means more demand for their local currencies.
Looking at the Lilangeni, how is it performing against some of the world's greatest currencies?
Yeah, no, thanks. With the Langeni, it's been little changed against the dollar and against the euro, at 16.65 against the dollar and at 19.21 against the euro. We have seen, and that's really because markets are waiting for this data that's coming out. The most important data piece coming out today, as we mentioned earlier, is the result of the U.S. Federal Open Market Committee in terms of the direction of interest rates in the United States. As we said, we expect that there to be no no change in interest rates, but it's really the language that the Federal Reserve is going to use that will drive investor expectations. So I think markets are just waiting in anticipation. Once the data is out, you will likely see repricing of the currencies and other types of assets.
Right. Briefly, if we could wrap it up, was this crisis or the conflict in Iran has gone longer than many countries would actually like. Allow me to ask, what's the worst case scenario in terms of markets? What's the worst that could happen?
That is a difficult question. The honest truth being that we do not know what we do not know.
Yeah.
From a market perspective, what you likely see on the extreme end is a reduction in asset prices, which then leads to real impacts in economies, which could lead to a significant reduction in economic outputs that then plays itself out in the days in the day-to-day lives of normal people like me.
Well answered. Thank you very much, Bongani. That was Bongani Mabuza, Head of Treasury at Nedbank Eswatini, just unpacking some of the latest in markets today. Otherwise, this has been another edition of Nedbank Business Watch right here on Eswatini TV. From myself and the crew, thank you for your company. Take care.
Make better money choices. Choose a bank that takes your money seriously. Business Watch was brought to you by Nedbank.